Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Sean Tierney from Insights, and this is a show where I sit down with product experts and industry leaders to talk about all things industrial automation. And this week on the show, we have Winston from QNX here to talk about robotics and the current trends in the industry. Now, before we get to that, though, we do have some housekeeping to talk about. First thing first, I'm seeing more people on YouTube ask, hey, why is there an audio-only version of this podcast? Well, really quick, Google got rid of Google Podcasts. So on YouTube now, we not only have our 12-year-old The Automation Podcast video editions, we also have the audio edition that was going to Google Podcasts. So I put audio edition on the thumbnail. I'm going to try to put it even larger and bigger so that you'll know if it's the audio edition or the video edition. Now, note that when the vendor does not sponsor their appearance, there's no ad revenue on YouTube. So when the vendor doesn't sponsor their appearance, then the video edition becomes members only. Thank you to all the members on YouTube and the automationblog.com. Really appreciate you guys. Got some great stuff coming out for you guys as well. But if you do see an episode that's audio only, it's not in both playlists. That's why, because when a vendor doesn't sponsor their appearance, then the video is just for our membership. In any case, that said, we got a lot of great shows coming up. I'm filming 2 more this week. I've met with a bunch of vendors about and having them on in the coming weeks on all kinds of different topics, from networking to security to just everything you could imagine, AI. And so I'm pretty excited with our summer schedule. And with that too, we just released a bunch of videos this week. So I have a video on the Automation Museum. I'm trying to raise funds to start a 501(c) so we can display some of this old equipment and maybe even get a space where we can open it to the public. And also I released updates on the Automation School, just redid the website, and we're getting a new server over there. So things are going great there. We've got a bunch new in-person classes that we're holding as well. So both those videos you'll find on the automationblog.com. Well, the Automation Museum you'll find on the Automation blog. The What's New in School you'll find at the Automation School, and you'll find both of them on YouTube as well as LinkedIn as well. And I just released a really great, it's actually pretty long, a 40-minute episode of the Automation Show on adding Moxa switches to TIA Portal and Studio 5000. And I know most of you don't have to do both. So I did include links to where the Studio 5000 starts and where the TIA Portal starts, but that just came out actually yesterday, your time. And I think you guys will love it. And Moxa did sponsor that, so it's completely ad-free. It's the only way I can afford to spend 4 days putting together a video of that is to have a sponsor. And yeah, I think it came out really good. I think you guys are going to find it fun. Whether you use Siemens or Rockwell, I think you'll enjoy that episode. And we got a lot more things coming. I got some great plans for the end of the summer that I'm really excited to share with you guys, but it's too early to do it right now. So in any case, with that, we're going to go ahead and now jump into the podcast with Winston from QNX to talk about all things robotics and the trends in robotics. I had a good time talking to them. They're a division of BlackBerry, so they have a very interesting place in the industry. So with that, I'll turn you over to this week's podcast. Winston, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this new report your company just did. I'm very interested. I read several of the reports that came out last year, but this year I haven't. This will be the first time I've looked at like updated data. I know a lot has changed in this area over the last year as well. So it's good that we have you on to talk about, hey, what is the market doing? What is industry doing today? Now, before we jump into that though, I always find it helpful for the audience to know, like, who are we talking to? So, Winston, if you could just give them a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and then we can jump right into the report and start talking about your findings.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. My name is Winston Leung. I currently serve as the senior manager at QNX. It's a division of BlackBerry. And my role really focuses on ecosystem development here. What we try to do is we help shape partnerships, build strategies around functional safety, real-time performance, and system reliability for embedded systems, including those found in robotics. So for those who aren't familiar with QNX, we provide the foundational software that powers the mission-critical systems. This includes everything from surgical robots in the operating rooms to autonomous mobile robots navigating complex industrial warehouses. And we've been around for 45 years. It's trusted globally, and we provide a very deterministic performance, fault tolerant, and we build in a lot of different security mechanisms. So when we're looking at this in robotics, especially when you're often dealing with like high stakes environments, whether it's human health or heavy machinery or 24/7 logistics. What we provide is that uptime and predictability for everything. And that's why a lot of people use QNX. Uh, Most recently, what we've done was we released the QNX Robotics Survey. And what that was really trying to understand is where the world stands when it comes to robotics adoption. It looks at how decision makers come across the different industries like healthcare, manufacturing, automotive, energy, and how they're using robotics today. What are the plans for the future? And how are they thinking about the challenges, the benefits, and the levels of trust that come along with deploying robots in the workplace?
That's interesting. And I know in manufacturing, we use a lot of robotics. Now, there are some that we typically don't tie into our control systems. People are very familiar with those type of robotics. They're like standalone, they're programmed. We usually will deliver something to that station. The robot does everything it does without being tied into our control system, maybe some digital I/O going back and forth. And then when it's done, the system continues on. But over the last 5 to 10 years, we've had more and more integration on the automation side, the industrial automation side, with robotics. And there's a lot of companies working on a standard to interface the industrial control systems with robotics. And one of the things with robotics that's been frustrating for some of us anyways, is that over the years, last 20, 30, 40 years, each vendor programmed differently. And so that was a challenge. You were either an expert, it's kind of like BLCs in many ways, or HMIs. You learned one, you were an expert at one, and then trying to go to the other was like my transition from learning Rockwell and then having to learn Siemens. It's a big ask. And so we're seeing more of that being addressed. We're seeing more easy interfaces or standard interfaces, so the two can talk together. And so, originally, I think most people, when they think of robotics and manufacturing, they're thinking of welding car body frames, right? So that's the picture we always see. You get all the robots welding the frames together. But I mean, now they're even being used for machine tending. I saw one interesting application where a company was using them just to change out the platform on a 3D printing machine so they can print
Mhm.
all night long. Nobody wants to work all night long. I mean, 8 hours is enough, right? So they would set the printers to print up, and then they would have this cobot just sit there and swap out the trays so they could go to the next print. So some really innovating stuff. But what did you find? Let's talk about some of the top things you found in this report and how it relates to what you do and what your customers do. Before we get to that, we got to pay the bills. So I want to tell you about our sponsor, theautomationschool.com. It's actually the next room over. We have a huge training room. We have some of the most unique products you'll be able to work on. I know everybody has a bunch of compact logics or S7 1200s or 1500s and, VFDs and HMIs. But some of the products we have here, you're not going to find in anybody else's training room, not even the factory's training room, because we cover all different products, right? So if you're coming over to do training with us, you can actually learn Siemens and Allen Bradley at the same time. You can learn how to get Siemens and Allen Bradley to talk together. You guys know I've covered that on the show, but you could do it hands-on. And some of the other things is like working with third-party products, right? So, if you go to a vendor's course, they're not going to have third-party products, but we have, as you remember from the wall in my studio, we have all kinds of third-party products. And I'm going to be taking some more pictures of all the different labs we have, the equipment we use with these third-party products. So if you know anybody looking for training, and we can do custom things too. So if you want to start training at noontime or 1 o'clock, because you're going to drive in 3 or 4 hours away. I was recently just at a large vendor's customer doing some training on their behalf. And yeah, it was a long drive. So if you want your students to show up in person at 12 or 1 and then train, and then on the last day leave around 12 or 1, we can do that as well. I don't care. We could actually run into the night if you wanted to go do evenings. Or again, some people don't learn very well in the evenings, but in any case, because I own the company, we can do whatever you want. As long as we have the equipment and the time to put it together, we'll do it for you. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. We also, if you're just want to come yourself, if you go to theautomationschool.com/live, you will see a place where you can pre-register for an upcoming class. And when I get enough people to sign up, I'll reach out to you and tell you what date is going to be held. And by pre-registering like that, you will save $50 off the $500 price. And if you're already a student, you'll save the price of your online course off of the in-person course. So maybe you bought my $200 Siemens or Compact Logics, Control Logics course. You're going to get that off of that $500, right? And if you don't own the online course, don't worry about it. If you come here for in-person training, at the end of your training, we're going to enroll you in one of those online courses completely free of charge so you can continue your learning. And you don't have to worry about trying to blitz all the content while you're here, because whether you're here for a day or 5, it doesn't matter. Whatever you have left to learn, you'll be able to do it after hours at home, and there's no additional charge for that. So with that said, let's get back into this week's episode of the Automation Podcast.
Yeah, so we can start with the survey. The survey was actually conducted by another organization this past March, and it surveyed about 1,000 decision makers from 6 different regions. So the major robotics industries of China, France, Germany, Japan, North America, and the UK. There were some interesting findings here and there. Some that actually stood out to me was that 50% of businesses surveyed that are already using robots, right? And 89% in China is using it. So there's a significant dichotomy between the different regions in terms of who's using what, where, and how fast robotics is evolving in the industry today. And then to add on to that, when you're looking at who aren't using it, right, there are about 47% that are planning to start using it within the next 2 years, right? Or 70% that have it sometime in the next future, that have it in the roadmap for future plans. So it's quite interesting to see the dynamics of robotics, how it's evolved over the years, where it's going. And I think a lot of this has to do with the trust in robotics overall. In the survey, it says that 77% say that they trust robots with essential tasks, right? And especially when it comes to safety and reliability. And I think that's something that's really important to pause on, because as robotic systems become more capable and more autonomous, that trust is just given, right? It has to be earned and kept. And we're at this transition point where we're going from fixed environments where you have a cage, it's completely separated between humans and robots, and we're moving into this more dynamic, unstructured environment where robots are working side by side with humans, right? Uptime is everything in the automation industry, and making sure that you can do it safely alongside human beings is very, very important.
Yeah, it's very important. I think a lot of our audience is used to motors and servos
Yeah.
and the safety that goes around that, because honestly, a lot of people, they talk about safety. I'm saying there's a reason why you don't give your toddler the keys to your car, because in the hand of an untrained child, a car can become a deadly weapon. I mean, the accidents in this country, just this country alone, every year is it's a staggering. Tens of thousands of people get maimed or killed in car accidents. So, something as innocuous, something that most of us use every day, and we're just used to all the safety precautions we take and that are built in. When you're designing a system from scratch, you have to understand those. I was just recently working with a vendor who, or actually an end user who, they were using a conveyor to load a loading conveyor to load a master conveyor, and they decided they were going to use it as a conveyor to unload the master conveyor. And I'm like, you need physical stops. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you were only ingesting pallets on this, right? These are heavy pallets with hundreds of pounds of equipment on it. Now that they're coming off the main conveyor onto this exit conveyor, you need a physical stop. What if it coasts? What if power goes out and it coasts? It could fall on the floor and land on somebody and, hurt them or worse. So safety is always so important, and that's why many of our audience are familiar with lockout, tagout. Many of them are familiar. We talk a lot about the control systems, enforcing IO, and the safety involved. The things you need to consider before you do anything like that. And with robotics too, if you're going to be working a lot, like you said, a lot of times we would have cages around them because once they're running, they're just going to keep running the program until somebody hits stop, right? Or somebody opens the cage, right? And
Yep.
so it's very interesting to see, in I mean, it was just recently, well, I say recently, maybe it was a couple of years ago, somebody was playing a robotic arm in chess and they got their finger broken, right? And so these are the things that the general public doesn't think about. But people in your business and mine, they have to think about quite a bit because this is, I mean, it's not even an option. It's mandatory. It's just part of creating an application that you need to have, the appropriate safety for your operators, whether it be a light curtain or a cage or, other scanners that we've covered on the show before. But so where do you want to go next after this? So that was kind of a great intro into the survey.
Maybe just one thing to quickly add. So when we talk about traditional robotics, right? As you mentioned, it's really fixed logic, right? The safety logic
Yeah.
is very defined,
Yeah.
completely separated. This survey dropped at a very critical point in time. And the reason why I say this is because we're transitioning from this structured to unstructured environment.
Mhm.
So it was interesting to see how people trust robotics to date, given all the safety standards we put in place. Now, as we move to more unstructured environments where you're relying more on the sensors, the cameras to detect humans,
Yeah.
right? I think that dynamic is going to change the complexity of the application. And then with the complexity, the safety element also increases as well, right? So now your safety cases also evolve, right? And with the new updates to the ISO 10218 standard, that's something very interesting as well, right? So they've integrated more collaborative type of applications, right? So they moved away from the term cobots and over to industrial robots with collaborative applications. So when you're
Oh.
looking at more software-oriented type of safety functions,
Mhm.
right? There's things like speed and separation monitoring, power and force limiting, right? These are things that are a little bit more software defined rather than hardware centric. So it's going to be interesting to see where it is moving forward compared to where we were in the past. So that's why we released the report today and surveyed the decision makers to this point, just because we want to get a better understanding of how comfortable were they with robots when they weren't sharing the same environment. And it will be interesting to see what they say now when robots are sharing the same environment. And that's going to really dictate how we build these systems from the ground up, right? When you're looking at these types of systems, you're going to have to look at the entire architecture. Safety isn't something that you just add on top, right? Safety has to be integrated from everything from the system design to the environment that's deployed in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us that are parents and grandparents, we worry about the younger generation having been in a very safe environment most of their lives, right? That you got to look twice before you cross the road. Just because that AMR has all these safety sensors on it, you still keep an eye on it. Things go wrong. Things can go wrong, and so while they're 99.9% safe, you got to keep in mind, and we got to teach the next generation. We still look twice before we cross the road, right? You still look twice when you're at a green light before you're going through the intersection, and we got to have that constant focus on safety and security and everything we do, even though it's easy to get lax. Now, some what were some of the biggest areas I see in the blurb that you guys sent me that you kind of went through, automotive, heavy machinery, healthcare, medical devices. Was there any listing of what areas are looking at implementing robots the most? You said that a lot of people are, half the people are looking at it, and a lot more people are planning on it. But is there any industries we can see in this report that talk about who's more likely to try to implement robotics in the next, 5 or 10 years? Hey everybody, I just wanted to jump in here one more time to thank our members, both on YouTube and at theautomationblog.com. I got some really exciting stuff coming up for you guys in the fall. I just have this huge plan that I'm working on. And so I really just thank you guys for being members. Don't forget, you get access to Discord. Don't forget, there's a whole library of older episodes you get to watch. It's not just what I'm doing this month for members. It's you got a whole library of stuff. We did so much member only content over the last couple of years that you have hundreds, literally hundreds of hours of content that you and only you get access to as a member, whether you're on YouTube or you're at theautomationblog.com. And of course, if you have any questions about your membership, reach out to me directly, please. And with that, let's go ahead and jump back into this week's show.
Yeah, for sure. So I think when we look at the survey, and it's not surprising, the robotics industry primarily services automotive. And I believe that I think the survey represented about 60% of the industry currently uses robotics. And that makes a lot of sense, right? We have millions and millions of vehicles coming out of the production line, right? And they're looking for the absolute efficiency when it comes to it, right? The more you delay, right, the less vehicles come out of the production line. So coming to it, I think that the automotive industry is the fast moving. And what's interesting from the survey is how China is leading a lot of the robotics development. And it will be interesting to see how that ties in with the automotive industry. Based on some assumptions that we're moving forward, right? Like the EV industry in China has been heavily subsidized, right? So moving from there, right? How has some of those subsidies implicated what's happening in the robotics industry, right?
Mhm.
And moving forward, how is their new plan of the Made in China 2025 plan going to impact the subsidization for robotics and automation? Um, so with just some of these assumptions, you can potentially see a ripple effect in terms of the cost of robotics coming down as well from the Chinese versus the rest of the world, just given how government's getting involved in this process and some of the policies and regulations that are being put through.
Yeah, I think if we take a look at the big picture, so the vast majority of the audience is located in the USA,
Mhm.
and I think we're all cognizant of the fact, because I've covered this many times, the evolution of the programmable controller and industrial control system. I mean, it started in big part in automotive, right?
Yeah.
Because they have complicated things that need to be done. The more precisely they can be done over and over again, the more accurately things can be done and repeated, the better parts you're going to make, right? Whether it's when you're making
Yep.
steel, if your forge is like spot on and doing the same thing every time, or whether you're assembling a clutch assembly, which is one of the first applications that a PLC was used on. So
Sure.
I think we all understand that. And I think we all understand too that, in different parts of the world, there's different focuses on what they make, right? And so a lot of companies I know just in my own backyard here, one of the things
Mhm.
they do is they make custom products and they turn it around quickly, right? So one of my favorite examples is a company that makes mini blinds. And they say, hey, we'll have you a custom set of mini blinds in 3 days, right? That's not something you can do without air freight from somewhere else across an ocean or a gulf or something like that. And so
Mhm.
I think and a lot of people like that. But in the same token, I think a lot of us understand too, there's the last thing to be automated typically, right? Uh, would be the very inexpensive products, right? And so we still see injection molding blowing away 3D printing because injection molding, if you're going to mass produce 1 million pieces of plastic, you can't beat, even though your upfront costs are not huge, you just can't beat that stamp, 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 stamp of injection molding machines stamping out those products. And so, when it comes to robotics, I think in the United States, one of the things we've seen that's kind of unique is machine tending where, you know, we had these really smart people who are retirement age, and they're like, none of the kids, because they all grew up using, touchscreens, none of them want to sit at a CNC all day and use and make these really high quality parts. If you go down to a place close to here, Smith and Wesson, or used to be close to here, um, they do a lot of machining there to make their firearms. And there was a lot of expert people there. And so now that's a very expensive process to automate. But if you can't find somebody else who wants to learn that task, then it's a good place to put a robot in for machine tending, in some cases like that. And then there's just dirty jobs, right? There's some jobs that
Yep.
people would take because it was the only job they could get back, 50 years ago. But now the younger generation, they don't want a dirty job. They don't want machining. I worked at a machine shop for a year before college, and I mean, you just come home, you're full of oil, and you're full of metal filings, and having a robot that could do that, which today easily can do that, right, is great. And back to the automotive too. A lot of people, when they think of robots, they're thinking of these robotic arms, right, that
Mhm.
articulate in all these different ways. But I think most of us know that a lot of the assembly we're using pick and place. A lot of people don't consider those robots. I do. And pick and place, if you're assembling, let's say the switch that goes in the door of your car, right? To put the windows up and down, right? That only needs to be assembled identically every time. it also need to be tested like a bazillion times to make sure it works, right? The design works. You got to validate the design that it's going to last. And so, folks who may be thinking, all right, robot arms or AMRs, a lot of pick and place applications out there too. And, smart conveyors, we can go on and on about that. But in any case, so I do think that what you may see in the US as far as robotic automation, the mix of what's going in you may find differs from what happens in Asia and what happens in Europe just because of the type of products we're making. And I think with the whole manufacturer local movement, hopefully eventually
Hmm.
we'll see all the products made everywhere, right? So your neighbor is making the product you want, and the person in Europe, his neighbor's making the product he want, and the person in Asia, their neighbor's making the product they want, which I think is a win-win for everybody. But I want to get back to the survey and the report. And I want to, is there any other insights that you pulled out of this report that you want to share with our audience? Again, we have an audience of very highly qualified engineers, and anything that you can share with them, like in the future of AMRs, cobots, or the new phrase for cobots, robots, where they're being used, how they're being used, anything else you want to share with the audience on this?
I think what's important to mention is that robots aren't just in manufacturing, right? And not just in
True.
automotive manufacturing. We're
Yeah.
seeing it all over the world, in service industries, in the hospitals,
Yeah.
in the operating theater. So there's a lot of different applications that robotics is being used
Yeah.
for. And Sean, as you mentioned, there is a ton of different applications, right? It's not just the articulated robot arms.
Mhm.
There's Delta Robotics, there's
Yeah.
SCARAs, there's AMRs. You can even talk about delivery robots, right? The sidewalk
Yeah.
robots, those
True.
are also considered robots. Drones can be considered robots, right? As a different form of a mobile robot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Exoskeletons, right? And then now this new fad of and direction of humanoids, right? So bipedal robots and quadrupedal robots as well, quadrupedal robots. So yeah, moving forward, I think the future is very interesting. And how we automate our world today and the society today is going to continue to change. But what's happening is that a lot of these systems are just going to be more integrated into society, and how we work with them is it's the great big question mark right now, right? Right now, it's all about innovation, right? And just coming back to it really quickly, it's with innovation, right? If you innovate, the industry is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, in the sense that if there's any failure with those innovations, right, it's kind of sets us back because it comes back to trust,
Mhm.
right? If
Yeah.
there's an incident, a fatality, a serious injury, right,
Mhm.
people are not going to trust these systems anymore. And that's primarily where the focus of the robotics survey was, right? How many people actually trust these systems, and what industries trust them, right? So when we're looking at surgical robotic systems, right, it's a robot. It's going into my body. Do I trust it? I better because it's doing the surgery for me. But in this environment, it's still the surgeon behind the surgical console doing the manipulation, right? So you have to be able to rely on the surgeon to do what he needs to do, but also trust that the robot's not gonna do something that's not supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I kind of get excited about that human behind the robot remotely, especially when it comes to, maybe you have an elderly parent and you want to check in on them. Maybe you want to stop by and
Mhm.
do the dishes, but you're on different coasts of the continent, right? And so, I look, and I know people probably think I'm weird for this, but I look forward to the time where, if you do have an elderly relative who has a limited motion, that you can telepresence via their humanoid robot and visit them, talk to them. We've seen this. We've covered some of the medical bots that where the doctor remotely controls it and does patient visits in different
Yeah.
cities to check up on the patients. They have the high resolution cameras. They can see exact pigment, exact small details that you can't see with the normal human eye. And so I think that will be great. So people won't be as lonely. You'll be able to drop in like you drop in now with the voice assistant, but you'll be able to drop in then and they'll be able to see you. Maybe the TV has a head, and they can actually see you. You can, take out the trash, do the dishes, pet the dog, and that kind of stuff. And I know people are probably cringing at hearing me say that, and that has nothing to do with control system. Before we wrap up here, though, I want to learn more about QNX. I think everybody knows about BlackBerry, right? And
Mhm.
the huge part it played in the evolution of smartphones, right? But QNX, and I've heard the name so many times. Could you tell us just a little bit more about QNX and what you guys do? I know you did at the beginning, but if you could just kind of take us a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so QNX is a division of BlackBerry. Um, so QNX builds the real-time operating systems, the hypervisors, and what we call
Okay.
foundational software solutions that would go into the PLCs or the SCADAs,
Mhm.
or even the robot motion controllers. What we provide is that real-time, deterministic, safety-certified foundational software that a lot of companies could use to expedite a lot of their safety certification. So when you're looking at the robotics industry, it'll be 61508. We're certified to SIL 3. If it's in automotive, it's 26262 ASIL D. If you're in medical, it's 62304 Class C. So we have all these certifications that we've embedded into our products. And what we deploy is what we call a microkernel architecture. So this architecture is how we developed our products, and it's the platform of all our different products. It provides that real reliability, that fault tolerance, and that really small uh, kernel code, best way to say it,
Yeah.
so that it limits the amount of attack surface for people trying to maliciously attack a certain embedded device or system.
Now, if I was it sounds like you provide this to the robotic manufacturers, right? And then they put their value add on top of it that really basically it runs on top. If I'm understanding this correctly, their systems run on top of yours as being that safety certified OS almost. And then they built their custom applications to control their robots on top of your foundation. Am I close?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Now, do you just sell like the OS like a Microsoft may sell Windows, or do you actually sell like the OS pre-installed on hardware?
So it could be a mix of both. We have a lot of our customers will just buy our OS, take a BSP, install it,
Mhm,
and then put it on their systems and start building their applications on top of that. And
mhm.
as I mentioned before, we do have some middleware. So we have some elements that are like sensor framework, right? So you have a lot of different sensors. We have a sensor framework that we provide as part of the QNX package, so that you can go market faster and make sense of all the different sensory data coming through.
That's excellent. That sounds really cool. So, I guess at this point, I just want to ask you, did we leave anything out that you wanted to talk about during this show?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is what's looking ahead. So I think what's exciting about the potential of robotics and the automation space is just how robots aren't just going to be working side by side with us anymore. And they're not going to replace tasks, right? What's going to happen is that we're just going to create safer factories, smarter hospitals, more resilient infrastructure. We're going to be much more connected than we were in the past. I was just talking to a colleague recently. Remember the mobile devices back in the day? They were just bricks, right? All you could do was dial a number and call somebody, right? And that's how connected we were back in the day. And then the evolution of the smartphone. So coming back to BlackBerry, they innovated the smartphone, and then now we could get emails, we can text messages. Now we can do FaceTime and video calls and whatnot. So the evolution of technology is very interesting and fascinating, and I see that same evolution happening in the robotic space.
Mhm.
And just moving forward, I think there's just going to be more excitement around this area, and driving more interest in what robotics can do for our society.
Yeah, and eliminating repetitive, dangerous, or hazardous jobs so people can do more jobs that require, rely on their creativity, their intelligence, their enthusiasm, right? So
Yeah.
again, speaking about the Peace Pod jobs I had as a kid, they were really boring. It's tough to spend a summer, I don't know, 12 weeks working a job where you're doing the same repetitive motion again and again and again, even if you're picking orders in a warehouse, right? And some people may love that. But I think today's youngsters, right, including my grandkids, they need something more engaging than that. So by allowing the technology, and it's seems to be uh, synchronous is that technology is growing at the paces the people don't want to do those jobs anymore, you know, necessity being the mother of all invention, right? So I think the timing is right to have humanoid robots, and we've shown them on the show before. A lot of people remember the automation show that I do was doing the updates on all the different humanoid robots. Some of that stuff is bad. If you ever unloaded a semi full of boxes, which I know anybody who's ever worked for UPS or in a warehouse or a FedEx knows, that's back breaking work. And that's not work you can typically do. Most people can't do into their old age. So yes, I mean, even having robots that can go into these trailers, take them out, put them on the right, and that just frees up that person to maybe get into logistics or to do something that's going to use more of his mind and less of his back. I think that's a good thing. And I really, Winston, want to thank you coming on. I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah. No, just one quick comment. I was at a conference in the robotics industry. There's a triple threat that robotics will help society, and it's the triple D. So dull, dangerous, and dirty. And that's kind of where the robotics industry really dominates.
Yep, dull, dangerous, and dirty. I love that. That's a great way of saying it. And that's, we don't want, we don't want to put all our artists and actors out of business with just random AI generated characters or paintings, right? I mean, we want to see what people do. I don't really care not too much, not anymore, what a random computer can do. I want to know what my grandkids can do. I want to see what they create, right? I'm not going to put my computer's drawing on my fridge, but if my granddaughter draws me up a beautiful picture, that goes on the fridge. So, we want to get rid of the I love that dangerous, dull, and dirty jobs. Let the equipment we design take care of that, so we can get more on the imaginative, creative, thought provocative jobs that are needed. And again, it's a journey. It's not a destination. But Winston, thank you so much for coming on the Automation Podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us.
Thanks, John, for having me. This is great.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I want to thank Winston for coming on the show and talking to me about what's going on in robotics. We have very different perspectives, I could tell during the show, but in any case, it was fun to sit down and talk with him and learn a little bit about QNX too, because I've heard the name a lot, but I never knew what they did. And with that, I just want to thank you all for tuning in. Now, if you want to become a member and support our show and get access to the video editions ad-free, when this vendor does not sponsor the episode, check it out. It starts at $5 a month, and the premium level goes up to $25. At $25, you do get access to our full Discord, and I've been working with some people up there. They've been having questions, and they're pinging me on different things. So it's not like a full-time. I mean, $25 a month, you're not going to spend, hundreds of hours with somebody. But in any case, I do love interacting with people and helping people answering their questions. Maybe they don't have time to take one of my 10-hour plus courses, right? So in any case, guys, check that out. Everybody has access to Discord. It's just how many levels you have will depend on what level membership you're in. So even level 1 and 2 members can access the Discord in certain levels. And I'd love to get your feedback on what you guys would like to see in that area, what kind of videos you'd like to see, and all that good stuff. So in any case, please feel free to reach out to me, comment on this episode. And hey, if you're so inclined, please consider giving us a 5-star review, especially on the audio platforms. That's huge. It helps us grow the audience and find new vendors to come on the show, and which, of course, I think we all like. But with that, I want to wish you guys all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.